You can do your own research into that.
No. You stood up and made a claim. You stood up and made a claim. So if I'm going to talk, hold on. Have a seat. You're done.
How many of you guys really know who Representative Andy Ogles is? He showed up at Belmont University yesterday, and he was going to speak to some students. They got into it with him before he got to that room. They did not want his ass there.
Hate is not welcome on Belmont's campus. Republicans are, but bigots are not. Never step foot on Belmont again. Remember that we can vote Andy Ogles out this fall. He's up for re-election this fall, and we can vote him out. Vote him out.
Muslims have a place in American society.
Those radical leftist college students are hanging out at Belmont University trying to get Andy Ogles to get the hell out of there before he even really gets the hell in there. One of the last guys that was shouting was talking about Muslims have a place in our society. That's because Andy Ogles had once said that, Muslims don't have a place in America, because Andy Ogles is a bigot. Because he did respond to what is it these folks were saying, and he posted that same video. And if you can't see the caption, this is what he said. This is what violent leftist rhetoric has inspired on American college campuses. Another town hall hijacked by a screaming mob? I don't have direct quotes, but I can assume that Andy Ogles was all on board with the actual screaming, violent, bloodthirsty, let's kill Nancy Pelosi and hang Mike Pence mob that ran up on the Capitol on January 6th after Donald Trump told them to. I feel like he was on board with that because everything Donald Trump does, he's on board with. And as a matter of fact, there's a direct thing, in case you guys don't know anything more about Andy Ogles. He had been asked, and in the house, in the hallways before, about what he thinks about at the time when more bombs were dropping on children in Gaza.
I've seen the footage of
You've seen footage of
shredded children's bodies, and that's my taxpayer dollars. They're going to bomb those kids.
So I think we should kill them all, if that makes you feel better. Everybody. Yes.
Andy Ogles wants to show up at Belmont University, and he's complaining about people protesting him. When in the meantime, he's been asked about shredded children's bodies in Gaza at our taxpayer dollar expense. And he says, let's kill them all. Can I drive the point home a little bit further? Even when he was coming into office, Andy Ogles has a resume. He has a background. He has a bio about all the amazing things that he's about. The problem is, you'll hear Rachel Maddow point out here, is none of those were true.
Mr. Ogles has described himself multiple times as an economist. But you might guess, at a minimum, that if you're going to call yourself an economist, that implies you have some training in economics. Alas, no. News Channel 5 WTVF in Nashville has looked into that and discovered that, in fact, Congressman Andy Ogles has no degree in economics. WTVF found that Mr. Ogles in his life has taken a grand total of one community college course in economics, which he barely passed. And that was the extent of his collegiate work in the subject. Congressman Ogles also said that he graduated from Vanderbilt's Graduate Business School, which would be very impressive. In reality, he reportedly took executive education classes, which is a short-term non-degree program where you get a certificate. Thanks for showing up. Not actually a graduate degree.
This is a guy that was complaining about DEI and people being hired onto things that they don't deserve to be hired onto because they don't have the real qualifications, because their skin is too dark, or they don't have a penis. That's how Andy Ogles likes to talk. But in reality, what we've discovered is he doesn't qualify for any of the things that he's talking about. He tried to make himself look like this well-studied, multi-background individual that deserves to be in Congress. The only thing is people voted him in. I'm not sure if it was based off of that or if it was the bigotry, but she wasn't even done breaking down all of the embarrassing things that this guy lied about. This part is my favorite.
Congressman Andy Ogles also claimed that he was a former member of law enforcement who worked in international sex crimes, specifically child trafficking. That experience in law enforcement maybe was him serving for 2 years as a volunteer reserve deputy in one county sheriff's office, a volunteer position from which, according to WTVF, he was released because he didn't meet the minimum standards even for that. For good measure, that sheriff's office said that Congressman Ogles had no involvement in international sex crimes. Congressman Ogles also claimed to have a degree in international relations. Turns out that too is a lie. The congressman today released a statement saying, I previously stated my degree was in international relations. When I pulled up my transcript to verify, I realized I was mistaken. My degree, turns out, is in liberal studies. I apologize for my misstatement.
This is the brain trust of the MAGA Republican Party. These are their all-stars. These are the people that show up then at Belmont University, and he wants to shout down at students who then confronted him over these hateful things. So before I get to this little town hall he had with some of these students, I'm not sure how large that room was. It didn't look all that big. But before we even get to that, I also want to remind you guys of one other thing about Andy Ogles.
Ilhan Omar's talking about how Somalis helped build this country. Oh, bull crap. Right? You know, there weren't Muslim prayer rooms in the United States of America until 1920. The first one was in Chicago. Wasn't a mosque in this country until 1934. It actually was built up in Idaho because of the railroads, because you had displaced Syrians from the Ottoman Empire that came to this country to work on the railroad. So if anybody was talking about what the founding fathers were contemplating, it was Baptists and Methodists and Puritans and Quakers. It wasn't Islam. In fact, Jefferson and Adams met with the ambassador because of the Barbary pirates to say, why do you keep attacking our ships? And the ambassador said, it's because you're not Muslim and it's our job to kill you. I mean, like, they wrote about the fact that they are a people content with war. And so this idea of attacking who we are, and so you're right. We're not a melting pot. This is not some giant fondue pot. I like fondue, right? But that's not what America is, right? And so this is, and I understand what he was trying to say, but the delivery, I think, and ultimately his misunderstanding of who we are as a people. If you want to be an American, you've got to earn it, right? You've got to be part of our culture. You've got to own and be a part of our heritage. You have to want to build this country in the same way our founding fathers did. And so if you're building temples or mosques and you're undermining Christianity, you're not assimilating.
That's his worldview on the United States of America. You know, the founding fathers hated them some Muslims too, so therefore we don't acknowledge Muslim immigrants in this country. I think that's what he was going about there. But also, he's really leaning on those founding fathers and how they built this country. I remember what they built this country on, enslavement. That's what they built this country on. I don't know why we have to keep, ignoring that fact. Something else I'm sure the founding fathers were also saying was, I'll buy that human being for this much amount of money. I remember all that stuff. They owned humans. So we're leaning on them to talk about the types of folks that they excluded and were concerned about. But this many years later, Andy Ogles is still on the same thing and says that those Muslims, those dirty folks, don't deserve to be here. What an absolute piece of trash bigot. He's been allowed to become this type of guy because we've acknowledged and legitimized Donald Trump, who always says these types of things. So keeping all that in mind, as he speaks to this student here in this town hall that he showed up at Belmont University to take part in, he was challenged on AI developments and the use of AI technology, specifically in war fighting, specifically in how we used that technology. It was reported to bomb that little girl's school on the very first day of this war in Iran.
The problem with this sort of software is that there's bugs, and these sort of bugs can kill a civilian or kill a baby walking with their mother. All these sort of, you don't think that's something to be concerned about as a
Absolutely.
U.S.
But now,
representative?
again, you still haven't cited a specific source of where that's occurring. Now, what I can tell you,
You can do your own research into that.
no. You stood up and made a claim. You stood up and made a claim. So if I'm going to talk, hold on. Have a seat. You're done.
I'm going to call you out.
No.
You don't want to
Get on your phone and find me a specific.
You don't want to take the time to research yourself.
Can you imagine? I'm sorry. I was a bit more of a hothead in my 20s. Don't know how old that college student is. But Andy Ogles to tell someone, and right in the middle of a back and forth exchange, because he wants like a full report about these previously written reports and stories about the reasons why we bombed that little girl's school. And we're using AI technology that has its issues. To have a seat, you're done? Bro, this isn't your place. This is like their place. Man, like I got like angry for that kid. I was like, man, you better not sit down. Bro, you better not. And he was about to, and he thought to himself, he's like, hold on. But they went on, carried on back and forth with this fight where he thinks he can tell grown-ass folks that they can sit down because he doesn't like the questions that they're asking and the way that they've cornered his ass. Luckily, there was one other student that stood up and tried to ask him, because he went through all kinds of BS through this back and forth and all of his points that he was trying to make to these students. And she got to ask him more questions about why there's this double standard.
So it's my understanding that we're here in a kind of good faith dialogue. Do you believe that it's fair that you're asking him to cite his sources when you've been making claims and not citing your own?
What claim would you like me to cite?
I'm just referring to that got very heated. And you were.
I simply asked him to point me in the right direction so we could discuss it.
You're not letting me finish my statement.
Hold on a minute. So I decided, what source would you like me to cite?
Anything that you had in that dialogue with him, you were saying things and you were not citing his sources, your sources, and you were asking that he cite his. That is not a good faith dialogue.
I'm going to give you one of those examples. Because she was challenging him on things that he said that didn't make any sense or didn't have any sources that he was citing with them in order to prove to these students, because he thinks they're all stupid, that what he's saying is based in reality. Because like the rest of this Republican Party right now, led by Lindsey Graham at that press conference, they're all like falling over themselves to push for this ballroom for Donald Trump. And in pushing for this ballroom for Donald Trump, they have to keep saying how he's constantly under attack of being murdered. So in that comparison, he made a statement that oddly, he didn't cite anything behind, and the rest of these students were not really taking.
That's what happened, and that's significant. And some of the rhetoric, I stirred the pot. You all know I stirred the pot. That's why some of you got this stuff up, right? That's fine. But also, you're welcome to be here. Like, let's talk, let's have a conversation. Let's disagree. That's the great thing about our country. But, there were no assassination attempts on Biden or Obama. Right? Multiple against President Trump. Charlie Kirk. You can murmur all you want.
Sir, there was an assassination attempt on Obama.
Not a real one. Someone took a shot and hit Obama. Negative. Someone killed Charlie Kirk. No one got close enough to Obama to actually get it done, which is a good thing. By the way, I never spent any time with Obama, Clarity said. But, President Biden, I was with him several times. And, even though I don't particularly like the president, the former president, always respectful because he was the commander-in-chief.
If only there was a way we could discover if Andy Ogles had any sources that he could have cited to these students about his claims that Donald Trump is the only recent president that's had assassination attempts carried out against him. Obama had none. Cite your sources, Andy. Cite your sources, because they all laughed at him. And he said, you can murmur all you want, because he was embarrassed. Because in reality, what he doesn't really understand is there was like 11 of them or so. 2008 Denver plot. That was one against Barack Obama. Even before he even took office, 3 men were arrested for plotting to shoot then candidate at the DNC in Denver. I was actually there. Glad that didn't happen. Here, maybe this will be a little better if I do this. In 2009, there was a Turkish plot. 2011, White House shooting. Oscar Romero Ortega Hernandez fired multiple shots from an automatic rifle at the White House. Crazy. 2012, a militia plot. 2013, a death ray plot. 2013, again, ricin letters were also sent. I remember that. 2015, ISIS-affiliated plots. All kinds of plots were taken out towards Barack Obama, and I remember they were documented at the time and people talked about them. The thing is he switched his story to then talk about how, did anyone get right into his face and shoot at him? I guess you want to make your point against college students that apparently are swimming in the leftist plots and their left-wing rhetoric all the time. You should probably come with actual facts.